Hey everyone, welcome back to DWeb Decoded, a podcast by Filecoin Foundation that explores the intersection of blockchain and the data economy. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Teana Baker-Taylor, who is co-founder and chief operating officer of Venice AI, which is a privacy-first, decentralized AI platform. Teana, it's great to have you here.
Hey, Aaron, thank you so much for the invite. It's great to see you. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Amazing. Yeah. Nice to reconnect here. And to get started, I would love for you to give us a quick TLDR of just what Venice is, and then maybe tell us a bit about your personal background and how you became involved in this project.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I often joke that I'm a reformed transaction banker. I got into crypto professionally about 10 years ago because I was just so fed up with how broken the traditional financial system was. And I really wanted to be part of building some alternatives to that. So I've been both on the commercial side, the go-to-market side of the industry, building features and functionality for users, as well as being deeply involved in the policy side and the regulatory space of the industry as well, working directly with policymakers and regulators on developing hopefully what come out to be balanced regulatory approaches that don't stifle innovation. So yeah, that's my background. And I am now one of the co-founders and COO of Venice. So Venice AI, as you said, is a private, uncensored, generative AI platform. Basically, in a nutshell, it's ChatGPT without the Orwellian stuff that often comes with AI services like KYC to access models and handling your prompts and conversations over to the government when they ask for it. So Venice wouldn't, but they actually can't do that because we never had your prompts in the first place. So all of your data and all of your conversation activity, all of your images, et cetera, are stored only in your browser and never on Venice's servers. So how did I get into Venice? I was learning about AI basically by using the well-known AI tools that we all use today for both work and personal stuff. And one thing that I noticed continually was this censorship bias that I felt was almost baked in to the models that I was using. And it really stood out to me. And the more that it happened, the more I kind of got concerned about it. And I was having a conversation actually with a regulator about, kind of the ethics around AI. And the European Union was looking at how they were going to regulate AI. We were having this discussion. And the context that I had was basically that, open source or AI models, large language models are basically trained on and built by information that is created by humans. And so, humans are naturally biased, whether we'd like to think that we are or not. And so, as I researched this a bit more, my assumptions became reinforced that as long as humans are building the tools and training the models and the data is coming from the internet, which is also generated by humans, that, we're going to aggregate this human communication. And essentially, the bias is going to be, inherent and ever present within these LLMs. But the censorship piece, that kind of paternal element that tells you that you shouldn't be thinking about this or that I can't answer that, that is built in. That is not inherent in the model. And that kind of coddling of humans did not feel like machine intelligence to me, and that bothered me. And so coincidentally, Eric Voorhees reached out to me. He was talking about something he was, also experiencing the same type of thing, and he wanted to build something that would be an alternative that first and foremost would be private and that wouldn't parent, the human race. And so I was obviously very intrigued and decided to join him on this quest to create private, uncensored AI.
No, very cool. Very cool. Thank you for that explanation and kind of the journey into this wild world of AI. And you've done a lot in your career, and this is a very kind of interesting culmination, I think, of that kind of sums up nicely a lot of the things you've been working on over the course of the last. What was you said you were reformed what, like a reformed TradFi banker?
A reformed transaction banker.
Reformed transaction banker.
Yeah.
That's a very impressive title. So I cling on to that dearly. But well, I mean, I think anybody who knows you and who knows Eric, I mean, Eric's been around for a long time. He's probably known as, perhaps probably one of the most, very principles focused kind of entrepreneurs in the Bitcoin space, dating back to kind of the early days, early 2010s. And I think that's what, when I first saw that you and Eric were teaming up for this project, I was like, oh, like these are two folks who like I have a lot of confidence in, that these people are doing this because of principles and not just to like make a quick buck on a project or something, right? And maybe talking a bit about like what are some of these core principles that like you and Eric like really hold dear, and like how are you kind of manifesting those through this particular project, and maybe talk a bit about how, you're kind of touching on this a little bit earlier, but maybe like how does what you guys are building like really differ from all these other LLMs on the market that we all kind of know and use every day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first, thank you very much for the compliment. That means a lot. Yes, Eric is very well known for being principled. Maybe I am for other kind of ethical approaches, but yeah, Eric is absolutely the person that got me into crypto. So, I learned a lot about Bitcoin from Eric before I knew Eric. So it's actually very cool that he's also pulled me into the AI space. And I'm very grateful to him for that. I guess the first thing that I would say, and I say this every time I talk to somebody about AI in general, is everyone listening needs to really fully understand and appreciate that all major AI companies collect and store your conversations and your data and your information. And all of that is attached to your identity forever. So every prompt, every response that you get, all of your personal information that you may upload, that MRI scan that you had, everything is saved and it's analyzed, and it is able to be shared with ad networks and their partners, rogue employees, hackers, governments, you name it. And even if an AI company wants to keep this data safe, and we believe that they do, data breaches, we know, happen all the time. They often go unreported, so we don't even know the gravity of how often our data is breached. And any letter from a government or any other 3-letter agency, and that data will be handed over. So Venice doesn't collect or store your conversations ever. And because we never had it in the first place, we can't hand it over to a court or a government, or worse, in a dystopian future, your insurance company or the police. And I don't think people kind of like think through what might happen later. People have this general stance around privacy that I'm not doing anything. I don't have anything to hide. And that's not what this is really about. So we believe foundationally that everyone has a right to access the incredible innovation that is artificial intelligence in private and without censorship. And we're essentially building a platform where users can access these incredibly powerful AI capabilities and still maintain control over their privacy and still maintain freedom of exploration and expression. We also believe that this approach not only kind of enhances the individual user experience and their sovereignty, but ultimately contributes to a more open and diverse and resilient AI ecosystem. Today, things are becoming, very centralized and very, very focused with, a few key companies owning a lot of the compute and these very large, powerful models. So our entire system is architected with privacy at its core. That's our foundational principle. And when using Venice, all of your conversations remain in your browser. So they never get stored on our servers. And really crucially, we don't ever see your prompts or the AI's responses. And so, obviously this gives you more control over your AI action, but it also reduces the risk of breaches or unauthorized access. And it really enables our users to explore AI without compromising their privacy or fear. And I think that a lot of people have a lot of fear around using AI tools. We also differ because we use decentralized compute. So we utilize a whole network of distributed GPU providers for our AI inference, like Akash network. Some of your listeners might be familiar with them. And so when using Venice, you can clearly see which provider was used to generate the output that you receive. We also are different from other AI services because we offer curated access to the latest state-of-the-art open source models, so not black box models. All of these models are available to review on Hugging Face. You can see how they're trained, what their weights were. And you can absolutely, indeed, we've talked about this before, download them yourself and run them locally if you have the skill and the hardware to do that. I personally don't. And so Venice provides access to those same text and image models, as well as character interactions we added a few months ago in one easy app, so that you don't have to run the models yourself. And some of the models that we run are really too large, like Llama 405B, for a person to run on their laptop. So we're trying to give that decentralized open source experience to basically everybody, to mainstream normies that might not want to do this on their own.
And then how do you think that the state of like just decentralized open source models, such as these ones that you guys are kind of opening your platform up to, how do these hold up, or how do these compete with perhaps like the big centralized models at this stage in terms of just user experience and just quality of the inference, quality of the outputs and whatnot? And kind of thinking of this, I'm coming at this question from this whole idea of like crossing the chasm, where if you want this innovation to be successful, it has to be able to at least offer what the competitor's offering, then offer something better as well. But like, how are these open source models competing or standing up against the traditional centralized models at this point, just in terms of that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that was one of the kind of fundamental things that Eric specifically was evaluating before we started on this project. And a couple of years ago, the answer would have been not great, maybe 70% of the quality and the efficiency that you would get with, a ChatGPT 3, for example. But in the last 18 months, last 24 months, maybe, and certainly in the last 12, the open source models are competing basically neck and neck. So if you look at the benchmarking for, I mentioned Llama 405B earlier, that model exceeds on some benchmarks some of its competitors. We saw a huge interest in DeepSeek a few months ago. That model performs extremely well. And what I think is different in the open source space, as opposed to when you kind of look at like a Anthropic or a ChatGPT environment, open source models can be fine-tuned specifically for specific types of tasks, whether it's creative writing or coding. And that's not always visible to you in some of these kind of, aggregate services. And so if you're looking for a specific type of model that does a specific type of thing, those models for coding specifically, like Qwen, can outperform some of the mainstream models because they have been specifically fine-tuned to do so. So yeah, very competitive.
No, that's super interesting. That's quite compelling. And I guess it's encouraging for folks that are really, really believe in this open source future, like want to kind of prevent this sort of AI doomerism narrative, right? Where we want to kind of head this off where we can. Is that these are models that can be used not just by like enthusiasts and purists and people who really hold these principles sacred, but just by everyday people. You're going to get as good or better results than you would just by using ChatGPT or one of the other kind of big VC-backed centralized models. So that's super interesting. And speaking of that, maybe it's a good time to pivot to you guys just hit like 1 million users recently. So congratulations on that. That's pretty exciting. So I think that's definitely a testament to show that there is demand for this type of product and demand for like alternatives to what's perceived as, these big centralized models that presumably have a lot more like marketing muscle than in VC, so kind of backed war chests than you guys have. But maybe reflect on that. What's that process like? What does that mean? What's the significance of this moment? And maybe what was it like getting to this point? Like, what was maybe like the biggest, kind of challenge that you guys had to break through to really get that user adoption curve moving?
Yeah, so we're really excited. The team, I think we're equally excited by the response that users see a clear market fit and our user base continues to grow. But mostly it's just driving us to do more and to do what we're doing even better. We have a small team, so we don't have hundreds of developers and engineers like ChatGPT or Anthropic does. But we're obviously very dedicated and mission-led. And I think that comes through in the delivery of the product. We have an incredibly active Discord. And one of the comments that we get from our users is that they're surprised by how often our CTO, for example, will be in Discord, troubleshooting with people or answering questions or taking feedback. He personally runs our beta group within the Discord. So he's in our Discord every day. Eric and I are regularly in the Discord, but our entire team is there just kind of vibing with our users and getting a better sense of what they want. So, while it isn't a community, like a crypto community led project, like some of the others that, you and I will be familiar with, it does definitely kind of have that vibe. And so 99% of our features come from our user requests, which I believe is one of the key reasons for our growth, honestly, because we're just hyper user focused. We have a really active feature base where users can basically ask for anything they want, any model they want, any capability or feature that they're looking for. And then other users can, upvote or downvote those ideas. And while we don't do absolutely everything that's in the feature base, or, don't do it immediately, we do get lots of comments that we're very quick to respond to user, requests. And we give a lot of credence to that feedback. So I think that's kind of what's got us here. I will be honest with you that building a consumer-based product without all of the traditional analytics that you get from, either the marketing element or the usability, we don't track that stuff. So oftentimes when we're troubleshooting blind. And so that relationship that we have with our users is even like more critically important to us, because oftentimes we'll need, we might be up against a bug and we can't figure out what's causing it. And really the best information that we can get is that interaction that you had. And so as a user, you can, download and share an encrypted prompt. And so unless you do that, we can't see what's gone wrong. So we have to have a great relationships with our users to be able to kind of troubleshoot and debug sometimes. So it's cyclical. It's circular rather.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, and I guess you are kind of at a disadvantage there because you're not kind of collecting and storing all this user data, so you can't really create all these fancy analytics dashboards analyzing that data that can help inform you as to what decisions to make or what the problem might be or what people like or they don't like or these types of things. So you're kind of deliberately kneecapping yourself in a sense, right? But then again, it
Yeah.
forces you to be much more kind of user focused in the Discord chats and things of that nature, and just really relying on some of these relationships and direct user feedback instead of just hoovering up a bunch of data and just kind of analyzing it and seeing what. Well, generally people seem to prefer this or that or the other thing, but really focuses you to be more kind of one-on-one with those users, which I think the users probably appreciate that. I mean. I certainly I think any customer who's using a product and they get instant feedback on a complaint or an issue or a suggestion, like they usually appreciate that sort of thing. So do you see Venice as like an example of how, as like maybe almost like a case study example of how these open decentralized solutions, these AI solutions, can compete with decentralized kind of behemoths? Is this a roadmap that other folks can follow? And we've had on the show like Morpheus and like David Johnston, some of these guys who are also building like decentralized AI models and these types of platforms. And but I really think, and even just talking to David Johnston, I think one of the things that he always emphasizes that like there's the gap between the centralized and the decentralized open source in this area. The moat isn't as big as people think it is. I think a lot of people buy into sort of the AI doomerism narrative, but they don't realize that the alternatives are actually, like to what we were talking about before, actually quite good, if not better than the kind of the big centralized models. And would just love for your thoughts on how how Venice is maybe like an example or maybe a case study for like, hey, that like, you don't have to buy into the doomerism, right? Like there are alternatives out there.
So I think centralized AI absolutely allows for very efficient processing of massive data sets, right? And again, because it's centralized and they can see like, oh, users are rage clicking on this thing. There must be something going on there. And, they have this ability to kind of see into what you're doing and tool because of that. Centralized models learn, right? So if a user continually puts in, a really badly constructed prompt, then over time, that model will know that, if you put in, cat with hat over and over and over, that you want a certain type of image and it will start serving that up to you. So when you're using open source models and this decentralized infrastructure, you do lose some of those efficiencies. But centralization, as we know, in any form, finance, versus crypto, centralized AI versus decentralized, that centralization risks, data monopolies. We're starting to see that now. Single points of failure. And there's a real potential for misuse of, for me anyway, what's increasingly looking more and more like a concentration of power with big tech. And, that makes me nervous. So I think, I mentioned before, major players like OpenAI and Anthropic have hundreds of engineers and developers, and we're, quite a small team. And so we have to be hyper-focused on what we're trying to do. And, some of the hyper-focuses of the others, like Claude, like I really like Claude if I need to distill a large amount of data quickly into like usable insights, right? I don't have to do that manually anymore. It will kind of give me the trend that I'm looking for quite quickly. I'm just personally highly aware what I'm putting in there, and that I would never use it for anything that I didn't want in the public domain. And I think that's the issue that we have, right? That people they really just don't appreciate what the information they're putting in, how it can be used, how it is being used, and how it can affect them personally. So like I saw something on Twitter this week, in a few different places, that there have been reports about how the Meta's AI app, how the feed is basically sharing the posts and the engagement, the conversations that people are having with their AI. And it's basically like, I don't think that these people realize that their AI conversations are being posted publicly, because it's like their medical and tax records and home addresses and, confessions of affairs and like all kinds of crazy stuff, right? These people cannot understand that this is just going to show up in somebody else's feed somewhere. But to me, this is unsurprising. People are really used to using social media, and they're just kind of not thinking, right? We go through our life, not really intentional a lot of the time. But unlike, most edge tech, like until something happens, and likely here, something big is going to happen, people don't wake up until it does. So like another example, there's a court case going on right now in New York. I forget who's suing who, but basically it's a copyright infringement case. And so the court is telling OpenAI that they have to hand over all of their users' prompt data. And I think it's within a certain period, but it's like all of their users.
Oh, wow.
And so tons of information is potentially going to be handed over. And, one, that information is personal. And two, it's completely unrelated to the case, potentially. So that's just nuts. And like with anything, I'd really love for people to prioritize their privacy now before a major hack or a breach. But humans are predictably resistant to change. We don't like change. And it usually takes something bad to happen to kind of force it. And when you look at like, are we a competitor of ChatGPT? We're definitely an alternative. And I think that's okay. And I think it's okay to use different tools for different things. But a lot of what we engage with AI with is deeply personal in its nature. And we should start treating that information like we do, our PIN for our bank card, like this has, it could have, and I think it will start to have a direct impact on people personally. And they need to wake up.
Well, in the kind of the PR and comms world, there's this what they call it's like the New York front page of the New York Times test, right? Where like you shouldn't say anything publicly that you wouldn't want to be like on the front page of the New York Times. And maybe it's worth thinking about applying the same standard to these AI models. Like, don't type in anything into ChatGPT. Don't tell ChatGPT anything that you wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times. Basically, like that might reroute people's behavior quite significantly, right?
I think that people are, they're like talking to it. Like, I mean, we have this muscle memory around social media. And I always say to people, like, would you post your bank statement on Facebook? And if the answer is no, then why would you put that into ChatGPT? Right? It just doesn't make any sense to me, but there's this disconnect there. But any kind of centralized service is potentially, storing that information, can access it later. Again, like I said, hand it over to somebody. And, maybe that New York case, it's not such a big deal. Maybe they're not looking for something. But, sometimes, life mimics art. And, I just continually am reminded of Minority Report and the whole precog thing where, you're being potentially arrested for what you think. Right. So a lot of what we engage with in AI, we could be exploring some, topics that might be taboo to you. That doesn't necessarily mean it's taboo, right? We all have our different thresholds of what our risk appetite is and, what our values are. And that's okay. Like, we're not all meant to be homogenous and the same, like the board. But if in an environment in the future where we're going to be evaluated on what we thought, that's problematic. And people need to be aware that that information is being documented and saved.
And maybe this is a good chance to pivot, maybe just to kind of wrap up here. Just given your policy background on in both kind of traditional finance, crypto, and now applying some of these principles to decentralized AI. And I think this issue of AI safety and decentralization is really an interesting one where you have, I mean, I think a lot of the same arguments for like, oh, why permissionlessness may not be appropriate in the crypto world, because like, oh, people might use it to do bad things, right? If we don't KYC, if there's not sufficient money laundering controls in place, like people might use this money or this blockchain to send money to bad people or finance bad things or whatever. And I think you're starting to see some of these same arguments pop up around decentralized AI systems, where it's like, well, what if people are using this AI model to, research how to, I don't know, do something bad, like make a bomb or something, right? And I'd be interested just to get your thoughts on like what parallels do you see here between kind of this, AI trust and safety issue as applies to kind of decentralized AI models, and what are some of the parallels to like what you've maybe seen in the crypto world before this? Kind of I guess just bridging together these two worlds of like kind of decentralization and permissionlessness. What are some of the parallels, and maybe where are some of the areas where you see some differentiations?
Yeah. So like, how do you make a bomb? That comes up a lot. And I'll be honest with you, because we do, market ourselves, or we talk about ourselves that we are, censorship resistant, we're uncensored. That is one of the first prompts that people put in when they're testing Venice, like, how do I make a bomb? And Venice will tell you. ChatGPT typically won't. Sometimes you can use special prompt engineering to get it to open up a little bit. But honestly, you can get that information on Google. So a lot of the examples that people give me, I'm like, yeah, Google that, like, it's there, right? And the reason that the LLM can provide you with that information is because it probably got it from the internet in the first place, right? Going back to what I said at the very beginning, all of this machine intelligence has been trained on the information that we as humans have generated and put in, right? And it does a calculus. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, with, again, kind of, sovereignty, the idea that, my thoughts should be governed. Like there is nothing inherently bad with exploring a whole random, myriad of ideas. And those ideas and what is lawful or unlawful or acceptable or not can vary widely from place to place, right? There are countries where I'm not allowed to drive or go to school because I am a woman. I would not be allowed to, access these tools. So where is the safety line? The other thing is, we're serving adults, and the AI space fits, completely into like free speech. We're talking about speech, just in the same way with crypto. So the parallel there is that code is speech. And so if somebody produces code and builds an algorithm, and then 100 people use it for something good, to set up a smart contract to be able to send micropayments to Venezuela, and somebody else uses it for something bad, does the good of the 100, is that outweighed by the bad of the one, right? And we just don't believe that's the case. The other thing is that you have all of these safety features that, are supposedly, embedded in these models that won't allow you to explore topics, or that won't allow you to create certain types of images. And again, if you Google boobs, you're going to get boobs, right? So the ability to make, a naked woman on an AI platform, I just don't see how it's any different to what's already out there in the world. And again, like, a pen can be used for evil, and a pen can be used to write the most beautiful, sonnet that ever existed. So yeah, I mean, I just don't subscribe to that school of thought. The decentralization element, again, is what is the antidote to that dystopian control. So by using open source models, we know exactly what data is in there. We know exactly how it's trained. There's no hidden weights that are going to skew something in a certain way. And then again, by using kind of open source decentralized compute, right? Anytime you're using decentralization, the risk goes down because it's just more transparent, right? And there is, 1,000 people that are in the know versus that one person that's in the know. And the ability to not like manipulate and control, I think, is probably far more relevant for like human race's safety than, any type of system prompt that we might put in that would prevent you from getting a naked woman with boobs.
Well, I think that was probably the first time the word boobs has been used on this podcast. So, but it is a good example though, right? Because it's like, yeah, all this stuff. People complain like, oh, what if you can use this LLM to find this thing or to generate this image? But it's like, yeah, like these things are not difficult to find just using Google or any basic internet search mechanism. Like anybody can find this information. It's not like,
it's not even dark web stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's
this isn't like you don't need Tor, like you don't even need a VPN.
Nope.
Like any basic person with just a simple Google search, it can find this information, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a great point to hammer on. Is just like, look, like we're at the point now where the technology's evolved where like this, there's no exclusivity here. Like this is just ubiquitous information at this stage.
And I think from a policy perspective, one of the things that I was a staunch advocate for was not necessarily regulation, but clear and actionable guidance that gave builders and founders direction of travel, right? Rules of the road, so that you kind of understood like what's outside of the scope, what's inside the scope. And anything that fell into, a truly decentralized bucket, right? DeFi, in the broader sense, like how do you regulate that, and why would you want to, right? Because we're back to code again, as opposed to a centralized service which holds keys, holds money, is facilitating transactions for you. One is a sovereign activity and one is a intermediated activity. And the same is kind of true for AI. But ironically, what we have is a real focus on the decentralized players, while the centralized players are like, oh, we're fine over here. We'll create our own rules. And, much like the way social media went from the beginning. And so I would just say from a policy perspective, I think that we should all be very aware of any time that decentralization or open source of any kind receives scrutiny that is, misplaced. And so, in the AI space, we've had some rollback now of certain AI policies that were coming out of the Biden administration by the Trump administration, and a very clear stance that like open source sits outside the scope, right? Because it is more transparent and you can see what's in there. And, the idea that AI could be used as, a weapon of mass destruction, and how many billions of parameters would that model need to be able to cause that kind of concern? We're not there yet, right? And I'm not saying because we're not there yet, we shouldn't be thinking about what those rules might look like. But anytime somebody zeroes in on open source, I question the motives.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb, or maybe heuristic to approach this with. Is there's some ulterior motive here, most likely, if they're just sort of blatantly attacking the open source component and saying, well, what if people frees up people to do things that they shouldn't be doing? It's like, well, there's like it's one of these kind of emotionally based arguments where when you look past it, it's like, okay, there's some other motive going on. There's some other ulterior motive at play here that we should probably be mindful of. So maybe to wrap up here. Let's just chat about, maybe tell us a bit about just what's your roadmap next 6-12 months, and how can folks find you if they want to get in touch or learn more?
Okay. Well, you can find us at Venice.ai. It's the company's name and the platform. And you can find us on Discord and Twitter as well. Roadmap, we are one of those companies that specifically, doesn't have a roadmap per se. Again, because we're really focused on what our users want, and AI changes really fast, especially open source, right? Something new happens every day. That is not an exaggeration. So for us to have like a 24-month roadmap, that would be like just dumb and crazy. But we do have some things that we're working on, we're excited about. So last month we launched a $27 million incentive fund. And the purpose of that is to advance private, uncensored AI application development, agents, infrastructure, et cetera. So we really want to support builders who are using the Venice API, which today is the only private and uncensored source of scalable AI inference for agents and developers. We've got about 80 applications from our first cohort. So we're really excited about some of those projects, super innovative, and we'll be spending time with those grantees on this cohort to get their projects up and running. We also recently announced a partnership with Fleek to build the first end-to-end solution for private agents. So this is really cool. Yeah, this infrastructure combines Venice's privacy-first inference with Fleek's agent deployment and hosting platform. And so the Fleek platform handles basically the complete agent lifecycle. So if you've never created an agent before, you can kind of go in and click through a menu and complete some things. So you're filling in a profile for a dating app. You know what I mean? It's super simple. And then you don't need to kind of cobble together multiple services. With Fleek, you get a single platform, and then Venice is the inference provider for all the new agents that are generated through Fleek. So we're really excited to lean into this partnership, and we have plans for potentially our characters becoming agentic. We see a lot of opportunity in the agentic space, and things are really actually happening, right? They're not just like Twitter bots, like agents are actually doing things autonomously now, which is very cool. And last thing, we launched our Venice token a few months ago. And we really didn't have an idea to launch a token when we launched the company. But most AI platforms charge for AI inference per token, different type of token, which creates really unpredictable costs that is based on usage. And so we've created a model that is just fundamentally different. And basically VVV enables developers and agents to stake tokens to access ongoing perpetual inference, basically at low to no cost, because we also offer staking rewards. So you could be quids in on that deal. But essentially our belief is that if we enable developers and autonomous agents to inexpensively and predictably access decentralized compute, then this is just going to fuel innovation and provide users with more optionality. So those are kind of a few of the key things that we're focused on.
Well, very cool. Well, Teana, thank you so much for sharing all these insights with us today. Really appreciate the opportunity just to hear about Venice and like your story and the roadmap and what you guys are building. And it sounds like you have a lot of exciting things in the works. And congratulations again on hitting 1 million users. Hopefully, the next million are easier than the first million. So, I really appreciate your time, and we'll have to have you back on at some point to kind of give us an update on how things are progressing. But in the meantime, everyone check out Venice.ai for your privacy-first inference needs. So Teana, thanks so much for coming on the show today, and we'll have to have you back on again sometime soon, as I mentioned. But really appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next time on DWeb Decoded.